Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. I hope all of you have had a most wonderful, relaxing week. And I just wanted to share with you my thoughts as we began this final Shabbat, the Shabbat of the end of the Sefer of Bamidbar, of the time when the Jewish people are in the desert. We're so happy to have everyone joining us each and every week to start and to go into Shabbat with a thought of Torah, with a connection to the parashiot that we're dealing with, and especially to what's going on around us in the world. You know, our parasha begins in the parasha of Matot. It starts to tell us about this idea of a person fulfilling their word, keeping their word to another person. If you promised somebody that you would do something, if you swore or you made a neder, or whatever it is that you said that you would do, you got to do it, okay? That's the whole beginning, keeping your word to other people. But what is fascinating to me is that the second part of the parasha, actually, after Matot, which talks about keeping your word, we move on to the second part, which talks about Mas'eh, and it refers to all the different journeys of the Jewish people. And every time you find two parashiot together, those two parashiot together are incredibly linked in their nature, and they're supposed to communicate to us also something about the world in which we're living in that moment. And I just wanted to share one idea about what this looks like. You know, I remember reading just a little while ago, someone was talking about the current situation where people, they owe lots of money to the bank, and they were giving financial advice. You know, who should you pay first? Don't pay rent, pay this. Pay your credit cards. Pay this one. Because if you don't pay the credit cards, you know what happens? You have this problem or you have that problem. Everybody is kind of trying to find the angle over who you should keep your word to first. You keep it to the credit cards? Do you keep it to your mortgage? Do you keep it to your car lease payments? Do you keep it to your telephone? You know, and there's this whole argument between all these different financial advisors. And I thought to myself, they have it all wrong. Because actually, if you're trying to figure out who you need to keep your word to most, it's not to the credit card company, it's not to the banks, it's not to your parents, it's not to your children, it's not to your wife. The person that it is most important to keep your word to is to yourself. Now I want to share just what that means. And I think perhaps that's the connection between these two parashiot, having them one after the other. The Mas'eh, the various journeys that the Jewish people go on. Each and every stop we know from the beginning of Parashat Bamidbar, we already learned this idea that the stops that the Jewish people went through in the Midbar, these 42 different stops that they stopped in, they were incredibly symbolic, far beyond the specific places that they were stopping in their journey in the desert. This described all the various stop points, inflection points in a person's life. One of the names of the places is Kivrot HaTa'ava, the burial of desire. That's a stop a human being needs to go through in their life when they overcome some sort of desire in developing their life. Another place is Di Zahav, when there's enough of gold, when a person recognizes that too much materialism is enough. There's a maturity, a stop in life that a person reaches when they realize, you know what, I'm working too hard right now. I should slow down, maybe buy less, but spend more time with the people that I love. What is remarkable to me then is all of these journeys, all these different places that a person needs to visit on this journey called life until they reach the promised land. Do you know what you need in order to be able to get there? You need to keep your word to yourself. Let me ask you a question. When you were growing up, what did you think that you wanted to be? Those thoughts, those dreams, when someone asked you and they said, what do you want to be? You didn't say an actuary or an accountant or a lawyer as a child. You didn't say that you wanted to go into real estate. You said you wanted to be a policeman. You know why? Because policemen save people. We just went to a bar mitzvah the other day of a young boy, a young man actually he turned into, Stanley Carey. Unbelievable. And one of the things I shared about him was when he was about 2.5 or 3 years old and he came back from his first days in nursery or whatever, and they asked each kid what they wanted to be. And this young man, you know what he said? He said, I want to be Moshe Rabbeinu. And you know why I want to be Moshe? I want to be Moshe because Moshe speaks to God. At the time of your youth, when you are young, the things that you tell people you want to do are monumental. You want to be an astronaut. You want to save lives. You want to be a doctor. You want to be someone that people come to for comfort. And then at some point, we sell out on our dreams. When we are young and we get yelled at by our parents, what do we say when we're a child? We say, when I have kids, I'm going to be much nicer than you are. I'm never going to say... And as we grow old, we are forced actually to dial that back. I'm never going to lose my temper. I hate it when you get mad at me. We say a lot of these things, but we somehow fail to register them for a later learning point in our life when we could draw on the innocence and on the totality of the way a child thinks about destinations in their life. So you want to know how you go on a life's journey, how you achieve these magnificent things. Keep your word, not to anyone else, but to yourself. When you decided the last time you gambled, I promise this is going to be the last time. Keep your word. When you got angry last time and you destroyed a relationship and you promised your wife or your child or your best friend, I really need to get help. Keep your word. Go out. Get help. The most important person to ensure that you are honest with is yourself. When a person does that, then all of the stops that they make become stops not that they visit, but that they conquer. A lot of people go through poverty. And when they go through poverty, after spending so much, you know what they tell themselves? You know what? I'm seeing now that car, I didn't need it. That, extra house and wherever, I didn't need it. That fancy vacation, I didn't need it. And then Hashem smiles on him because he's learned his lesson. And the wheel of fortune spins again and he starts to make more money. But he forgets the things that he said. If I ever get wealthy again, you know how much tzedakah I'm going to give? Because they've tasted the taste of poverty, of starvation, of anxiety, of worry, of shame. In those minutes, when you say something with the fullness of your heart, when on Yom Kippur you promised something, when in a casino or, God forbid, or in a place where a person makes a terrible mistake, they say, I'll never do it again. Draw on that. Capture that. Keep that. And if you do that, then ultimately each stop that you go through, every tragedy, every great thing will become an indelibly engraved learning experience, one that you could grow from leaps and bounds, and that will take you one step closer to your promised land. I want to share one last thought. We are now chock full, right into this period of the 3 weeks. And we all know that the nature of this space in time is a tragedy that happens to the Jewish people where we lose Eretz Yisrael, we lose our homeland. But that idea, again, is not only about Eretz Yisrael and the Beit HaMikdash. It refers to our own personal Beit HaMikdashes, our own personal homes. When we are in Galut, we are destined to roam, to never feel satisfied, to never feel okay with where we are. It's part of the nature of Galut when your soul doesn't feel like it's home, because it isn't. How do we get back to that place? I want to ask that we keep one promise. One. We said 2 words a long time ago at the foot of the mountain. We said Naaseh v'nishma. And the Chidushei Harim writes a magnificent insight. He says, every single Jew stood there at the foot of Mount Sinai when God said, keep my Torah. What did they say? They said in one voice, we will do, Naaseh v'nishma, and we will listen. Asks the Chidushei Harim a bomb question. I don't understand. If every single person was saying it, he asks, why did we need to say it in the plural? Why didn't 3 million people say at the same time, I will do and I will listen? You only need to say we if you're answering on behalf of others. If every voice was raised, if everyone said, I'll do, why did they need to say we? And the Chidushei Harim writes, because each and every Jew in that split second didn't only say, I'll keep the Torah, I'll keep the mitzvot, I'll be proud of being Jewish. They accepted upon themselves. They decided in that moment that they were going to ensure that the other person standing next to them and the person behind them and the person 2 rows in front of them and the Jewish person they meet on the train and the person they're interacting with at work and the person they're sitting next to at a restaurant, each and every Jew that crossed their paths, they said, we said, back then, Naaseh v'nishma. I'll make sure that I'm doing good, but not only me, I'm going to look out for my brother as well. Who's he going to marry? Who's she going to marry? Am I making sure that their choices are in line with what the Jewish people need? Maybe it needs me to suggest someone to them for them to marry. A single person who's looking to date, marry in. Maybe they need you to make a suggestion. Are you thinking of that? You see someone who's in the synagogue, doesn't have a pair of tefillin. He goes up to the, he looks to see if there's tefillin. The shul has no more. Your responsibility is, after you've prayed the Amidah, to take your tefillin off, walk up to him and say, would you like to borrow mine? You know why? Because you need to keep your word to yourself. You promised back then. I did too. Na'aseh v'nishma, that I'll make sure that he puts him on. That she goes to the mikveh. That she makes challah. That he keeps his word. That he's honest. That he doesn't need to turn to crime because his back is against the wall, and I ensure that I lend him the money. That person knows about nice kosher restaurants so that he, even though he has a good palate, doesn't have to be let down by some simple Jewish food. May God bless us always to have the integrity of ensuring that words that come out of our mouth now, or even words that came out of our mouth as a people once 3,300 years ago, are kept to the best of our ability. And may we be zocheh once again to celebrate Shabbats and holidays together as a people in our home, physical and internal, in the land of Eretz Israel with the coming of Mashiach b'mhera v'yamenu. Amen. Thank you so much for being here. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom.